Kia tau ngā manaakitanga, a te mea ngaro, ki runga ki tina, o tātou, kia mahia, te hua, ma kihi, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te rio, toi te araha, toi te rio Māori. Kia tuturu, kia whakamaua, ki tina, hui e, tai ki e. So I've just said, let the strength and force of our ancestors be with us. Free our paths from obstruction so that our words, power, and our love and language are upheld and we're moving forward together. So I just hand over to Michelle for a little bit of introduction and housekeeping.
Kia ora, thanks Kathryn. Kia ora koutou everyone, ko Michelle Gallagher, tēnei. I'm the Program Coordinator here at the Centre for Social Impact, supporting our amazing associates. And if you have been with us before, you know Te Pūaha Talks are a free series of webinars brought to you by the Centre for Social Impact with support from Foundation North. I'm going to bring up a little interactive poll now. Foundation North are keen to see who of their grantees are coming along and learning with us. So if you can get your voting buttons out. Lovely. And Esther and Kathryn, you might just need to click out of it on the corner. Beautiful, thanks everybody. We've just got a little bit of housekeeping for today, so we're quite a quick session. So we're going to ask you to use the chat as much as possible. We'll stay on mute. Anything you say in the chat stays confidential with just us today. All questions are good questions. So yeah, thank you. Enjoy the session and over to you, Esther. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Michelle. Thank you. Kia ora koutou katoa. Ko kawarau te monga, ko kaore te awa, no ta hauna aho, ko Esther Whitehead toko ingoa. He mihi nui ki a katoa I tēnei rā. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you all. Great to have you here today. I've seen who's on the list and we've got a wide range of charitable groups, so it's going to be really great to work with you today. I'm Esther Whitehead. I'm one of the associates at the Centre for Social Impact, and my mahi is generally aligned very much with climate impact work. So I'm going to pass back to Kathryn, and I'll speak to you soon.
Kia ora, Esther. So tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Kathryn toko ingoa, no Czech Republic mi ingarangi o Kutipuna, no Tamaki Makaurau a hau, ko Kuatunu toko kāinga, e te rohi a iwi o Ngāti Hei, no reira tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm Kathryn. I'm originally from Auckland, but I now live in Kuatunu, which is on the east coast of the Coromandel Peninsula in the rohi of Ngāti Hei. So my ancestry is Czech from my father and English from my mum. And yeah, just a little bit more about me. I've got a background in community psychology and evaluation, which is most of my work that I do for Centre for Social Impact, and I've been an associate here for about 8 years. Oh, well, I just want to, I'll get started now. Thanks for the slide, Esther. I'll just thank you very much for attending this session, and we'll just start with a little bit of background about why we're here today talking about strategic planning. So last year we invited community groups who had attended Te Pūaha events just like this to give us a little bit of feedback about what the topics and issues were that they're grappling with. So we heard everything from where do we get funding, how do I work in a culturally responsive way, how do we align with te tiriti, how do we do evaluation and impact, and what's this we're hearing about social return on investment, all those issues that I'm sure you'll be more than familiar with. So as a result of that, we developed these three capability development resources that are all on the Te Pūaha website. So we've got the funding guide for organisations that are looking for funding and trying to find out what to do in that space, where to apply for funding. And we've got the capability wheel for larger organisations that are really trying to improve and increase their impact. And we've also got the Core Skills Toolkit, which is what we're talking about today. So this resource introduces topics that community groups said were important And it's for new and small community groups who are just starting out on their journey, or for larger organisations that are wanting a refresh around the topics. So next slide. Oh, yes, Esther, thank you. So we're here today talking about strategic planning. And the purpose of these workshops the series of workshops is to drill down into each of the topics that are in the Core Skills Toolkit. So in the toolkit, it's quite general what we cover. There's just a little bit of an introduction, why the topic's important, a set of questions, and some resources. So we're really going to go into quite a bit more detail about strategic planning today. And this is our 6th workshop that we've offered on the toolkit. So at CSI, we've got associates who work across a wide range of areas like Esther, and she's going to share with us some of the things she's learned and experienced when working with community groups on strategic planning. So over to you, Esther.
Tēnā koe, Kathryn, thank you. Awesome. So let's get started. We'll crack straight in. So what if your organisation's strategy wasn't just a dusty document on a shelf, but a living guide that you could use every day to make better decisions and to stay true to your values and respond to change, which is really important, with confidence? So I don't think you have to be a big organisation with a full-time strategy team to have a clear and purposeful plan. You just need the right approach to keep your strategy alive and, importantly, working for you. So we don't want this to be about you working for your strategy. We want your strategy to work for you. So hopefully today you will learn or relearn, because a lot of you have been in this space for a very long time and probably bring a great vast amount of experience to strategic thinking. But you might have the opportunity today to kind of re-prompt strategy and strategic planning and go beyond the basics and keep it practical and relevant and make sure it guides your work. So as Kathryn and Michelle both said before, any patai and questions that you have are really important. They don't come up on the screen, so they're not shared beyond Michelle and Kathryn. All questions are great questions. Also, I may frame some kind of rhetorical questions because this is more of a presentation rather than interactive. So if I do pose any questions, I won't wait for a response, but you can pop your thoughts of those questions in the chat as you go. So let's just start with the basics. I really want you to keep this kind of visual in your mind as we go all the way through this. So the analogy that I make is that strategy is the compass and plan is the map. So hold those 4 words and maybe use the visuals to kind of bring that back to your memory. So in terms of what we mean by that, let's just outline some of the differences. Again, you'll know this, but it's really great to kind of make it explicit as we go through. So the strategy is very much the why and the where. The plan is the how we do it and when we do it. The strategy is going to be setting the direction, and the plan is going to outline the steps. The strategy is big picture thinking, it's long-term and adaptive, whereas the plan is the detailed execution and can be short-term and specific. So the strategy might have, if you think about those things, it might have some long-term visions in there that don't show up in the short term and the specifics, but they're the steps to take us to the long-term and adaptive. So a really basic example, and I have chosen some basic examples in this presentation, but I want you to think of your own and how that fits in, is that the strategy in this example is to increase access to sport for low-income rangatahi youth in Aotearoa. And the plan that we've given here is to launch 3 new free after-school programs by March. So great difference in what they look like. If we outline what that can kind of show up as, we start with an idea. Now, we're all in this space to kind of make a difference. So the idea is the spark that we have. It's the difference we want to make in the world. And if you're short on ideas, then maybe you don't need a strategy, but I've never known anyone in the community space to be short on ideas. So the idea is And how it looks is let's work out what this looks like. So let's help more girls play sport. So a key question about that is, what do we care about? So the idea is always, what do we care about? What societal impact are we trying to make? The strategy might be focus on removing barriers. So maybe we've identified that girls aren't playing sport in our district as much as we would hope, and we want to remove the barriers. Some of the barriers in my district is that we're a very spread district. So I live in Tahuna, Queenstown. Our district is quite huge, with quite a low population, so it's quite challenging sometimes to achieve that. A key question is, where are we going and why? And we'll outline this later on. The plan might be, and the plan could look completely different depending on what it is that you're working with, to partner with 5 schools and hire 2 coaches by February. So pretty straightforward. This is exactly how will we do it. So the quick rule of thumb is that we spark an idea, we set a direction, and importantly, we create a to-do list with dates and people. Now, in previous workshops, I have actually done some significant work on to-do lists, because I think quite often we forget the strategy and we just get bogged down by the to-do lists. So there are other workshops that you can access that kind of speak to how we prioritize to-do lists. And also, maybe we need to put some of those to-dos back into the strategy, take them out of the to-do. So then, what does success look like? So we've kind of jumped to what this looks like straight away, but I think really it's about, what can you extract from your strategy? Where's the value in your strategy? So having these questions that are formed below from the get-go really helps to maintain a simple approach, and it just keeps you on track. So my experience with community groups and with my own charity that I formed is that sometimes we get caught up in the process, and we want to just keep asking ourselves, does this document help us? Keep it simple. Is it easy to follow? So a lot of strategies that I've seen end up kind of trying to market themselves in a way where you look professional and the layman's terms fall out and the jargon sometimes comes in. So remember, I think that this is an internal document in its first instance, and it's a map to guide you. Okay, so write it in layman's terms. Is it culturally responsive? So this is really brief in this particular workshop, but it's accessed in lots of other workshops that Te Pūaha talks do. Any references that you make should be both understood and worked through in a partnership, and should be achievable. So it goes without saying, but sometimes I think when we align strategic documents to funding, I guess the opportunities to access funding, that can sometimes be an area that we need to just hold tight on and ensure that we've got really understood references made. Is it short? It doesn't have to be short, but it sets the direction, and you can always flesh it out later. So in the charity that I started, we made this absolute mistake, and I've seen so many others do it, where we kind of got bogged down by all the things that we wanted to achieve in the long-term vision. And we went from an 8-page strategy to a 2-page strategy in the end, and just decided to flesh it out later. Importantly, can you actually turn it into actions? So actions are what's going to be the pragmatic, habitual stuff that forms the outcomes that you want to see. So holding these questions, and you can always take a screenshot or you'll have the resources afterwards. But having these questions, even though they're simple, I think just keeps you on track to ensure that success follows. Okay, so some common pitfalls. I think this isn't about kind of going straight into negatives, but it is about saying, what do many of us do that we could avoid? So this speaks for itself. I probably don't need to go into too much depth, but strategies do often sit on a shelf. We kind of form a new group, or we decide that we need to review our strategy, we review it, and then it's not actually visible. So avoiding this pitfall means keeping it really visible in a way that you want. So that could be posters, it could be reviewing it quarterly, that's up to you. But ensuring that this is a living, breathing, visible document. Another really common pitfall is that there's no follow-up or measuring progress against it. Now, this is very much a next step that I would advise. Many strategic documents don't have progress and metrics that follow up against them. So we are doing coaching as a component of this workshop. So there are 5 spots available for a 30-minute coaching session, which then allows you to do a deeper dive into your strategy and work with myself in order to do that. So I think Michelle will reference that at the end. Using a one-page dashboard with key goals is a really great way to achieve measuring progress against your strategy. Another really common pitfall is that goals are highly ambitious. Now, I never want to take away ambition, but I have seen that it actually trips people up and that they don't achieve the steps along the way. So this happens very, very often in the environmental and climate space. And that's because obviously a lot of our Paris-aligned initiatives are around reducing emissions by 2030 and 2050. So we have these goals, but we really have to be careful that we're not just wishful thinking and that we actually have a pathway which is robust. So I think refining your goals based on your real capacity is far more pragmatic than just having, highly ambitious goals that you actually can't achieve because there's only 2 part-time people in your organization, for example. And lastly, only a few people actually understand the strategy or the direction. Those who wrote it and those that were in amongst the WHOI and the stakeholder engagement, maybe it's only a few people and maybe it's not enough. So it's about ensuring that everyone that matters knows and understands what your goals and your visions are. So keeping this strategy alive is kind of the focus here. And we can do that through using tools and habits. So your impact, I believe, is directly aligned to the quality of your strategy. Some tools that we've mentioned are a living document. The suggestion here is Google Docs. You may have an array of software that is much more capable than that. But if you don't, Google Docs is just fine. There's lots of capability amongst that. The other tool that I've already mentioned is a dashboard. So what I mean by a dashboard is specific goals that relate and align. How do habits differ then? So a habit is around how we engage with the strategy itself. So a habit is a check-in. It could be a monthly meeting. It could be annual or biannual review. It could look however you want that to look. These are just examples. I would say, and I'll touch on it later, that the world is changing very, very quickly, and strategies used to sit and be valid for somewhat longer than they are today. So I think having an adaptive and agile strategy is really helpful to you. So the habits around forming check-ins to the strategy are probably going to be more common than they were in the past. Okay, another tip that can be useful is, has your strategy aligned with all levers of your organization? So obviously I don't know what kind of legal entity you are, but if you're in the charitable space, then your business may look something like this. You might have operational staff, and it might be from 2 to 100 people. You might have a board. You're going to have stakeholders, the recipients and the beneficiaries of the work that you do. And you're possibly going to have direct funders who you're trying to align with to fund your mahi. So when you write your strategy, it's coming from a place of intent, those ideas that are sparked. But what's really important is also the process involved in that. So how is your governance board working with you to enable your strategy? So this, I don't delve into this, but this is something that if you're interested, we could look at in the coaching sessions. So sometimes the bureaucratic process or the timely process of waiting for a board meeting could hinder the agility, for example, to implement the plans from your strategy. So when you write your strategy, just have a little think about whether you can lever the different parts or components of your organization. And if you're designing a simple dashboard, have a checklist that sits in each lever. Now, I may not have identified the levers of your organization, but I'm sure that you can. Now, I've just popped smiley faces on these just as a kind of really basic indicator that I think we do some areas much better than others. So let's say you've completed your strategy. What now? So there's more questions, perhaps got more questions than answers, but I think if you ask yourself these questions all the way through, you'll set yourself up for success. So question one, what's changed in our environmental community? Well, so much can change. We could have climate impact in our district, which could bring great floods or great droughts, and it could change some of the aspects of the behaviour of our community. It can change the socio-economic ecosystem that we're working within. We may also have legislative changes around what's required from a compliance point of view for charities, etc. Secondly, are we solving the right problems? This is the whole point of your strategy. An idea is sparked, you move in a certain direction, but you might find that you're solving a problem that no longer exists, or that it's not really solving the true aspect of that problem. I'll give you an example. If we look at waste minimization, one of the aspects around waste minimization is always referred to as zero waste, but that means really different things to different people. So zero waste can literally just mean, for example, an event where you separate waste out and it no longer goes to landfill. And then it's referred to as zero waste to landfill because components of the waste are going off to recycling. But your charity or organization might be trying to solve the problem of actually designing waste out of events completely. So the question that we ask here about, are we solving the right problems? And if we bring it back to our rangatahi and youth program, we might have started with an idea that sparked from what we're seeing in our community, but as we evolve and work with partners, that may well change. So do our goals still make sense? Kind of follows on from these other questions. And what partners or skills do we need next? And who's around the table? And is it mana to mana? So what I mean by this is the fact that we need to ensure that we've got mutual respect. We need to ensure that it's reciprocal. We need to ensure that there's genuine relationships. And we need to ensure that we're not diminishing mana of others in terms of othering in any way. So this is, I guess this shows up by ensuring that we don't undermine any other party's self-determination. So we're not doing things for people, but we're doing things with people. And a quick, really basic example of how a strategy might be agile. It's always going to reiterate, you're going to review it, and it's going to end in a different result. So let's just say that the original goal was to run 2 rangatahi events per term for the reasons that we outlined earlier in the workshop. The updated strategy might be create youth-led experiences that build leadership skills. So the key words here are youth-led. What we've shifted to is a co-design approach. So we've invited rangatahi youths to actually look at the event that we're running and say, what's not working for us? What we found in this space was that when we were running the 2 events per term, we were starting to see drop off. We weren't retaining youths in the way that we had envisaged. We had this idea that it was all going to work perfectly, but then it didn't. And that was because we hadn't involved rangatahi enough in their own experience. So by co-designing it for rangatahi by rangatahi, what we developed was leadership skills as well as the sports and health benefit outcomes that we were looking for originally. So it's a completely different shift. So from today, I guess it's just about remembering that a strategy is a compass and not a map, that you use your values as a guide and stay open to learning and evolving. And really importantly, share the strategy early on because it builds trust and alignment. The communication of your strategy is as important as the strategy. And I can't say that enough. I think, for example, I've worked a lot in the past with schools. I think a lot of schools have incredible strategies, but they're not always good at communicating that to their parents and their whānau. And so often if there's a space, that space will be filled with the narrative that the community suspects rather than the actual intention of the organisation. So let's leave it here with this little quote. Strategy is not what you say you'll do, it's what you choose to do every day. It's about letting your mahi reflect your values. So thank you all, and I'm sure there may be some questions. It's a quick run through, isn't it, Kathryn?
Yeah, it was, but that was great, Esther, and thank you. That was super helpful and practical, and I'm sure people will have got some really good tips about how to develop their strategic plan and what to be watching out for. So, yeah, great. So let's just quickly look at those resource slides. Good. So look, if you go into the Core Skills Toolkit that's on the Te Pūaha website and you look at the strategic planning section, you'll see these resources. So they've been included because they're just really practical and useful, and they're aiming to keep strategic planning as accessible and relevant as possible. So you'll see everything from how to do a strategic plan on one page through to some useful tools or methods that you can use as part of developing the strategic plan. I think the only other thing I'd say at this stage is that we're keeping our ears to the ground about any issues, resources, topics that are emerging for groups like yourselves, small to medium-sized community groups. And we're also monitoring how the toolkit is used. So over time, you'll see these resources being updated, and there could even be new topics and issues that are included in the Core Skills Toolkit over the next 6 months or so as we re-look at where we're at with it and what's coming through. And the other thing is, if you've got some resources, some strategic planning resources that you use and you think are really useful, please share them now with the others that are in the group here. Just do that on the chat. So we'll now move into the question and answer time, and there hasn't been a lot of questions coming through, but look, I've got a couple of questions for Esther because I'll just pick up on some of the things that she's mentioned. But if you do have any questions, now's your opportunity to put them in the chat. And of course, there is the follow-up coaching if you want to take something specific from this session and pick it up with Esther at a later date. But look, I'll just kick off with a question, Esther. You alluded to your the to-do list that people have, and I've experienced that myself working in community sector, is that, small groups can have difficulty balancing where they're going with their strategic goals, and just getting caught up with the day-to-day operational activities that are often urgent and just need to be dealt with immediately. What advice would you give for groups that are dealing with that situation? How do they carve out the time that's necessary?
I think it's a huge question, so there's probably maybe another workshop there. But one of the workshops that I ran was just about using the Eisenhower box, which is basically taking your to-do list and refining it into a matrix where it's do, delegate, delete, and what was the fourth one, Michelle? I don't remember. And it's basically the opportunity to prioritize, and you can use it with your team, because what happens is in very small groups, we know that there's often nobody to delegate to. So it's about thinking differently about the word delegate. Sometimes it could be the word collaborate. Sometimes it could be using other resources, which may or may not be appropriate. I'm not an advocate for AI, but maybe AI is a tool that you would put under delegate. I think the challenge for small organizations is the reactionary response that is often, really challenging around you're a small organization, but your grassroots and people actually work really well with you in the community, but they suggest and they want more from you, and you just don't have the capacity to do it. So I think it's also learning what to say no to, and that does come back to strategy. I think it comes back to, how ambitious are our goals? Do we need to refine it? And it's just about that constant reiteration and review, because sometimes we get caught up in, I guess, just the roller coaster of doing more equals doing better, and that's not always true.
Kia ora, Esther. That was useful. We have had a couple of questions and comments that are coming through, which is great. Ruth's made a really interesting comment about the juggle of funders' expectations overlaid to the vision and direction of the organisation, which can end up in too many goals and objectives, and then subsequently overwhelming. Have you got any suggestions for the best way to manage those expectations of boards and funders with a plan that's doable and realistic?
I think this is a real tension actually in philanthropy, in that we have funders who have a certain remit and a certain vision themselves, and then we have recipients to grants who have their own worldview and their own vision and their own parameters, but they often have to break some of that in order to seek funding. It sounds somewhat cynical, but we see that happening where you try to align your own organisation with a funder's organisation. I think that in philanthropy, funders are becoming more aware of that. And I think it's a great opportunity for grant recipients to actually make suggestions about how they want to interact. So one of the things that we've done recently is through our climate action work with the community trusts, is to actually use a roundtable approach for looking at the value of funding and what people are wanting from funding, rather than a kind of paper-based form approach. So I think it's about being honest, but also pitching your ideas perhaps in more innovative ways. Does that help?
I'm not sure. Let's
ask
Ruth. I'm sure there was some really good practical tips in there. And we've just finish off with just one last question here, which is very practical. Somebody's asked, if you make an update to your strategic plan, are you expected to update your mission statement with the Charities Commission? I'm not sure if you can answer that one, Esther.
My short answer is I'm not entirely sure anymore. I used to be more across that than I am now. But I think if it's completely different, yes, I think you would have to. But if it's very much aligned to the old vision statement, then I don't think it's too much of a problem.
Sure, Esther. So let's wrap up this the question and answer time now, and we'll just move into finishing up the workshop. Before we go, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and just note that this is the 6th of 7 workshops that we are offering on the Core Skills Toolkit. We've got one more next week, which is on hauora, wellbeing, which will be run by another of our associates, Tuihana. And as has been mentioned, we're also offering 5 slots to have 30 minutes with Esther to follow up any questions that you've got from the session. So at the end of this workshop, Michelle is going to be emailing you out some information and the opportunity to register if you're interested. So I can see from the chat that there already is some interest. So get in quick would be my advice if you want to secure that time with Esther.
Can I interrupt? I'm so sorry. One thing that I didn't mention, which I think is probably really important for this discussion and anyone booking in, is your trust deed. So if you do choose to book in with me, you need to just check on your trust deed and ensure that you understand what that says for any kind of changes to your strategic process moving forward. Thanks. Sorry.
Great. No problems at all. Great tip there, Esther. Make sure you make the most of this time if you take up this offer. So we'll send a recording of this workshop. Michelle will do that. It'll also become be edited and be put up onto the website, onto the Te Pūaha website, under the Core Skills Toolkit. And there's also going to be a quick survey that Michelle is going to put up at the end, which she'll also put in the chat. If you could take your time to just quickly fill that in. Is there anything else, Michelle or Esther, before I finish up for the...
No, just thank you all for showing up today. I know that there's a vast amount of experience and I'd love to see 5 of you. So being quick and we'll go from there. Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks, Esther. Thanks, Michelle. And thanks everyone for attending. It's great. I think there was quite a big group here today, which is awesome. So I'll just finish up with a karakia whakamatonga. Kia whakaria te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuku whakatahi ai, kia turuku whakatahi ai, homie hui e, taiki e.
Thank you.